This is hide-and-seek chess, the newest addition to Deckmate's extra modes. It's a lot like Fog of War chess, but the game starts in an interesting way that completely changes how the game is played. Hide-and-seek chess is played on an empty, but otherwise standard 8x8 chessboard. Each player starts with 6 pawns, 2 bishops, and 1 of each of the other pieces off to the side. The game begins with a placement phase, in which both players take turns placing pieces on the board. Just like in Fog of War chess, you can only see the squares that your pieces can move to. Since pieces can't move during the placement phase, sometimes you will be able to see an enemy's piece at one point, only for it to be blocked later. You technically won't be able to see the piece after it is blocked, but because you know that it will stay there for the entire placement phase, the square gets marked with an icon of the type of piece. Also, since there is some overlap where both players can place their pieces, it is possible to attempt to place a piece on a square that already has an opponent's piece on it. Since it would be unfair to tell you ahead of time, you're allowed to attempt to place a piece on a hidden square, even if it already is occupied by an enemy piece. If you do this, one of two things can happen. If the square is empty, it will place the piece normally, and if it is occupied, the placement will fail, and that square will be marked with a question mark, since you don't know which type of piece is on it. The same thing will happen if a pawn's movement is restricted. Since it can only see where it can move to, and it can't capture forward, the square in front of it will not be visible if there's an enemy piece on it. However, the fact that it isn't visible tells you that there is, in fact, a piece on it, so it will be marked with a question mark. The marks all go away once the placement phase ends. Then the movement phase begins, following standard Fog of War chess rules. The game goes until a king is captured. The only ways you can draw a game are by agreement and the 50-move rule. There is no rule for insufficient material, since kings can capture each other. Although hide-and-seek chess hasn't been played by the community yet, there are some important things I noted in testing when it comes to placement strategy. First, your best opportunity to spot pieces in the back of your opponent's setup is at the very beginning of the game, since it will be much harder to reliably get vision of the other side of the board once your opponent has placed pieces in the middle. Of course, this goes both ways, so it seems like it will be best to find a balance between placing rooks and queens on the back line and pawns on the front line at the very beginning of the game. An interesting way to do this is to start by placing a pawn or two on the front line. This will guarantee you some kind of knowledge about 3 squares per pawn, as long as there are at least 2 squares between each pawn. Using this, you can identify files that are likely open, and place your rooks and queens to get vision. If necessary, you can block the file later by placing another pawn to defend your first one, which also removes the attack on your piece. Second tip, once an opponent has spotted one of your pawns with one of their pawns, it is less likely for them to place another pawn in front of yours, since that file is already blocked off. Because of this, it may be advantageous to place a bishop along the opposite diagonal. Third and final tip, black and white have to play the placement phase slightly differently, especially towards the end of it. Both colors have a unique advantage, since black will be the last to place a piece, and white will be the first to move. This allows white to play a bit more aggressively in the placement phase. They can afford to have one of their pieces attacked by a weaker piece at any point in the placement phase, since they will almost always be able to get out of it with their first move. They still have to be a little bit careful, since having 2 pieces under attack means that they're very likely to lose one of them if they can't find a counterattack. This leads directly into black's advantage. Since the player with the black pieces places the last piece in the placement phase, they get the final say in what the position looks like going into the movement phase. If they are sure a spot is safe, they can hold on to a strong piece and place it there at the end to create a threat on white's position. Or if they spotted a high value piece towards the beginning of the placement phase, they might be able to attack it at the very end. And that's all the insight that I have to share into placement strategy for hide-and-seek chess. Take it with a grain of salt, since I'm sure plenty of better strategies will emerge once the community gets their hands on it. Now I'd like to share a game of hide-and-seek chess that I played against my friend. In this game, I played with the black pieces, and went for my pawn and rook strategy. But I quickly realized that my friend is leaving his front line completely open. In fact, I'm having trouble finding any of his pieces at all. I figured I should play it safe, and not place my queen until I have an idea of what's going on. I eventually spotted his queen with my bishop, which gives me an interesting attacking option. He is likely going to block the attack from my bishop at some point, but if he doesn't defend this square, I could sneak a knight in to attack it without him knowing. He blocks it, and so I start working to get vision, to get a good idea of whether or not my attacking square is defended. I have to be very careful about my queen, since he probably hasn't placed his knight yet, and since white has the first move, he could easily put his knight on this square and attack my queen on his first move. So I decide to put my queen on the back rank, and find out that it is attacked by one of white's bishops. He places his knight to cut off this attack, which will allow him to fork my knight and rook, with a double attack from his bishop. That assumes that he knows about my rook, which can only be the case if his other bishop is on this square. I attack his knight, and cut off the potential line of sight to my rook. After white placed a piece that I couldn't see, I decided to start preparing to place my king on my back right corner. After a couple more hidden moves from white, it's my turn to make the final placement. Although it's very likely that there's a bishop on this square, I figured that I should place my knight to attack his queen anyway, since the worst that could happen is an even exchange. On the first move of the movement phase, Sure enough, there's a bishop there. I take back and realize that I'm now vulnerable to the fork again. He doesn't go for it, but he does spot my queen. And the double attack means that I can't take his knight with my pawn, or else I'll lose my queen. I also have no way of knowing if this file is safe, and it would be a great place for white's rook, so my only safe move is to slide the queen over one square. White takes one of my pawns, and so I take his hanging knight, and discover that he had taken my pawn with his queen. He moves it to safety, so I move my rook to see if he had just moved it backwards. He didn't, but now he reveals that he had a rook on the h file by taking my bishop, so I take it back and find out where his queen retreated to. He takes the rook, not knowing that my queen is still on the 8th rank. This puts me up a queen in exchange for a bishop, and since I already won a knight, I'm up a full queen. I soon sacrifice my bishop to find his king, and, not knowing where my queen could be, white quickly moves his king into my line of fire, ending the game. And that will do it for this video. Hide and Seek Chess is coming to Deckmate this Friday, February 2nd. Make sure to join the Discord server if you haven't already, so you can be notified as soon as the update goes live, and talk to other people that are interested in chess variants. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.